Chapter 8:15. Jun Muyan. Di Mingju angrily lowers his head and bites her lips. You promised to marry me, to be my wife. He's not using a question sentence, but an affirmative sentence. Muyan feels the pain and glares at him, pouting coquettishly. Are you a dog? Actually biting people? Di Mingju's hands are on both sides of her, his chest gently heaving up and down. Soon after, a gentle and joyful smile slowly creeps up his brows and the corners of his eyes. Muyan is a little dazed. This is the first time she's seen Jun Shongdaran reveal such a childish smile. Just like a child who originally had nothing, getting the sweetest and most precious candy in the world. Yang, you really promised to marry me. His voice is soft and hoarse, carrying a cautious dreamy quality. Muyan's heart suddenly softens to an unspeakable degree. She reaches out and caresses the man's face, then gently moves it away, pressing it on his chest. Fool, do you think I'm blind? The most charming, most outstanding, best man in the world is right by my side, waiting for me in a place where I can see him whenever I turn around. How stupid am I to not cherish it? Di Mingju, I'll answer you again, I promise to marry. However, Muyan hasn't finished speaking when Di Mingju's complexion suddenly changes. In a split second, his expression changes from ecstasy to alarm and anger. There's also a trace of painful paleness floating between his brows, but he restrains it in the blink of an eye. Di Mingju, what's wrong? Muyan is startled by the change in his expression, and she reaches out to grab his hand. But she finds that Di Mingju's hand, and even his body, are slowly becoming transparent. Di Mingju. Di Mingju takes a deep breath, and suddenly reaches out to pull her into his embrace. But this embrace isn't as tight as before, with a kind of emptiness that's about to disappear. Muyan, listen to me. I'm about to leave. Muyan nervously raises her head to look at him. What happened? Polar domain. Something happened. Di Mingju slowly says, I have to go back immediately to deal with it. What happened? Will you be in danger? Muyan unblinkingly stares at Di Mingju's face. His figure is already somewhat transparent, and his complexion is slightly pale. But Di Mingju's expression is the same as usual, without a trace of pain or panic. There was only reluctance. Muyan's heart calmed down little by little, followed by the same turbulent feelings of reluctance and longing. Yes, this man had not left, but he had already begun to miss him. Di Mingju reveals a gentle smile, lowering his head to kiss her forehead. Just some jumping clowns, how could Ben Jun put them in my eyes? There's an unparalleled self-confidence and arrogance in his voice, but it soon turns into a soft sigh. It's just that in the short term, I won't be able to return to the Yenwu continent. This time, even Ying Mai and Han Yi might have to go back with me. Yang, I'm sorry, Mu Yang covered his mouth and laughed in a carefree manner. If you know me well enough and want to spend a lifetime with me, then don't say such apologies. I'm not a dodder that attaches itself to you. I'll be with you in life and death, but it's impossible for you to stay by my side and protect me at all times. That way, I would lose my courage, lose myself, and become unlike Jun Muyan. Chapter 8:16. I finally got to hear your answer. With great difficulty, Yang finally agrees to marry him. His figure became fainter and fainter, as if he had melted into the air. However, his hand was still tightly holding on to Mu Yang, full of reluctance and pain. Yang, wait for me. No matter where you are, I will definitely find you. Wait for me. Di Mingju's figure finally disappears without a trace. Muyan stands there in a daze for a long time before she retracts her hand and looks at her palm. The palm that was just held by the man seemed to be burning. That place had been branded with the deepest imprint, the deepest longing. Patter. A teardrop falls on her palm. Muyan blankly raises her hand to touch her face, only to find that her face is already covered in tears. She stares blankly for a long time, then she says softly, that idiot Di Mingju, it's just a trip back to the Shoshen continent, why does it look like it's a life and death parting? Wiping away her tears, Mu Yang walks out of the room. When Xiao Bao sees her, he immediately pounces over. Seeing that she doesn't have Di Mingju by her side, Xiao Bao can't help but look inside. Where's father? How could his father be so good that he didn't fight with him over Nyangqin? A perfect smile appeared on Mu Yang's face. She patted Xiao Bao's head. Your father has to go back for a while. I'm afraid you won't be able to see him for a while. Xiao Bao's big sparkling eyes immediately dimmed. He raised his head to look at the distant horizon and murmured in frustration, Mother, is father's home very far away? Yes, very far. Then can't we go with Daddy? Right now, I can't. Only when we become strong enough will we be able to return with father. Hearing this, Xiao Bao slowly clenched his small fists, his blue eyes revealing a resolute expression. Xiao Bao will definitely become stronger. Then mother, father, and Xiao Bao, the whole family would never have to be separated again. Miss, just now, Yingmai and Han Yidaran suddenly disappeared. Yu Yang's anxious voice comes from not too far away, and Han Yidaran didn't look right before he disappeared. Yu Yang's words make Xiao Bao's small body suddenly tremble. He grabs Mu Yang's hand tightly and raises his head to look at her. Why did Daddy disappear? Even Han Yi and Ying Mai Jejie disappeared. Did Daddy really come home? Mu Yang strokes Xiao Bao's head and looks at the flustered Yu Yang. Don't worry, they're fine, they're just returning to the polar domain. The polar domain is the place where Di Mingju and Ying Mai came from. Many people in Hellfire Valley know this. However, only a few people knew where the polar domain was. Son-in-law, why did they suddenly return to the polar domain? Is there something urgent? Xiao Bao also widens his eyes, looking at Mu Yang without blinking, for fear that she would say something bad. Mu Yan smiles faintly and says slowly, Oh, he probably found out that the betrothal gifts aren't ready yet, so he went back to prepare them. Yu Yang and Xiao Bao stared blankly for a moment, then their expressions abruptly changed from nervousness to ecstasy. Miss, you're finally going to marry the son-in-law. That's great. I'm going to tell everyone right now. Haha, everyone will definitely be overjoyed. A joyful smile also appeared on Little Treasure's delicate little face. So the lecher had gone to prepare the betrothal gifts. Chapter 8:17. Although Xiao Bao was smart, he was still a child. As soon as Mu Yan says this, she immediately believes it without a doubt, just like Yu Yang. She happily carries the fat rabbit and goes to cultivate. His father wasn't around, so he had to work hard to cultivate. When Daddy comes back, Xiao Bao wants to give him a surprise. Mu Yang looks at Xiao Bao's departing back, until his figure completely disappears. The lazy smile on his face was slowly replaced by worry. Raising her head to look at the distant horizon, a whisper spills from her lips and teeth. Di Mingju, you promised me that you would come find me. You promised me. Shoshen Continent, Polar Domain, Lingxiao Hall. At this moment, the palace in the Lingxiao Hall where the sacred object, the heaven and earth mirror, was tightly surrounded. There were obvious red marks on the surface of the universe mirror. From afar, it looked like a crack, but upon closer inspection, one would discover that the heaven and earth mirror was covered in a stinky liquid. Elder Chang, Elder Ji, and Star Wolf stood outside the hall, glaring at the purple-clad young man and his subordinates who were guarding the universe mirror. Mo Rufeng, don't go too far. He clearly knew that the cosmos mirror was the supreme holy object of the polar domain, yet he dared to use such an evil thing like the upper evil water to contaminate it. Aren't you afraid that the Emperor will come out of seclusion and throw you into the 18th level of the burning water prison? The purple-clothed youth had a handsome appearance, but there was a gloomy and ruthless air between his brows. Hearing this, he couldn't help but sneer. Wait for Di Mingju to come out? Are you sure that if the universe mirror is destroyed, Di Mingju can still come out? Elder Chang's expression suddenly changed. What nonsense are you talking about? Ha ha ha, you think I don't know? Mo Rufeng sneers. Di Mingju's body went to the Yenwu continent through the Chenkuan mirror. As long as the upper evil water thoroughly erodes the Chenkuan mirror, I'm afraid that Di Mingju will never be able to return. Even if he does come back, I'm afraid he'll be heavily injured and beaten like a piece of trash by me. How do you know that Jun went to the Yenwu continent? Elder Chang almost bellows. The faces of Star Wolf and the others behind him were filled with shock and anger. Only Elder Ji seemed to have thought of something. His body swayed, and his face turned pale. However, everyone's eyes were focused on Mo Rufeng, and no one noticed anything wrong with him. I naturally have my ways. Mo Rufeng reached out to the heaven and earth mirror and injected spiritual energy into it. Red marks that looked like cracks immediately spread and grew on the heaven and earth mirror. The entire numinous sky hall began to shake violently, as if it would collapse at any moment. Stop! Boss Chang roared. Mo Rufeng, do you know that if you rebel against your superiors in the polar domain and destroy a holy relic, you will be punished with the death penalty of having your soul destroyed? Rebelling? Mo Rufeng's nerves seem to have been touched, and he suddenly roars hysterically. Di Mingju's throne was exchanged with my parents' lives. This throne should have been mine. What right do he and all of you have to say that I'm rebelling against my superiors? Today, I will destroy the sacred object, and make it so that Di Mingju will never be able to rise again. I will be the king of the polar domain. With that, he waved his hand. The people beside him immediately stepped forward, raised the weapons in their hands, and fiercely slashed at the universe mirror. The expressions of Elder Chang and the others changed drastically. They roared and pounced forward. However, he was still a step too late. Chapter 8:18. And most importantly, this Mo Rufeng, no matter how excessive the things he does, in the polar domain, no one will be moved by him. Under the fierce attack, the Chenkuan mirror is about to be thoroughly eroded by the upper evil water. At this moment, a gale sweeps through the entire hall. The whistling sound of the wind is accompanied by a pressure that can topple mountains and overturn the seas, shrouding everyone present. One by one, Mo Rufeng's men fall to the ground, vomiting blood. Just a moment later, they breathe their last. Mo Rufeng falls to the ground, his body twitching incessantly, blood gurgling out of the corner of his mouth. Immediately after, a foot steps on his chest. With a crack, his ribs are directly broken. The man's deep and dignified voice rings out in the deathly silence, making people's souls tremble. A waste like you also wants to take Ben Jun away. Mo Rufeng's gaze slowly moves up, finally falling on Di Mingju's incomparably handsome, dignified face. Fart. A mouthful of blood suddenly spurts out. No, impossible. How could you appear? Aren't you in Yenwu continent? Compared to Mo Rufeng's shock and amazement, Elder Chang and the others are overjoyed, and they all kneel down. Greetings, Jun Shong. Jun Shong, you've finally returned. Are you all right? Di Mingju doesn't pay attention to Elder Chang and the others' salutations. Instead, he looks at Mo Rufeng under his feet with an ice-cold gaze. It seems that Ben Jun was too lenient towards you before. Mo Rufeng was originally sure that Di Mingju wouldn't kill him. Even Di Mingju's men didn't dare to make a move against him. But at this moment, when he comes into contact with Di Mingju's bone-chilling eyes, he shudders. He can realize that this time, Di Mingju really wants to kill him. He really wants his life. No, you can't kill me. Your life was saved by my parents. Di Mingju, you can't be ungrateful. In order to save you, my parents didn't even care about my life and death. Di Mingju, you promised my parents that you would take good care of me. You want to go back on your word. Di Mingju condescendingly looks down at him, the corner of his mouth hooks up into a cold smile. Don't worry, not only will Ben Jun not kill you, but I will also properly worship you. However, don't even think about Zijin Palace and your cultivation in the future. No. Di Mingju, you can't treat me like this. Ah. Mo Rufeng let out a heart-wrenching scream and quickly collapsed to the ground. He twitched a few times and fainted. Di Mingju has directly wasted more than half of his cultivation. The entire hall was as silent as cicadas in winter. Even Elder Chang and the others didn't dare to breathe loudly. Old Man Ji felt cold all over, as if he would faint at any time. Only Ying Mai and Han Yi, who are standing on the side, can't get used to it. Wasn't Mo Rufeng courting death? Jun Shong and Miss Jun are currently in love with each other, unable to part from each other. Mo Rufeng actually dared to destroy the Chenkuan mirror, forcing Di Mingju to be separated from Muyan. And now that more than half of the Chenkuan mirror has been destroyed, Di Mingju would no longer be able to go to the Yenwu continent to reunite with Muyan in a short period of time. How could he not be angry? He simply hates it to the point that he wants to go crazy, okay? Chapter 8:19. With just a piece of trash like him? What a joke. Di Mingju orders people to take Mo Rufeng away, and dismisses everyone. Only Elder Chang, Elder Ji, Star Wolf, and Yingmai were left in the hall. Di Mingju's body swayed, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Jun Shong, how are you? Han Yi says with a sobbing tone, without the protection of the Chenkuan mirror, Yingmai and I wouldn't have been able to return in one piece. Jun Shong used his own divine power to protect us. But the spatial tears that Jun Shong has suffered are clearly more serious than mine and Yingmai's. Di Mingju coldly says, Ben Jun is fine, why are you panicking? Elder Chang glared at Elder Ji and roared, what are you waiting for? Why aren't you coming to treat Jun Shong? Old man Ji snapped out of his daze and stumbled over to the front. But Di Mingju waves his hand away, coldly saying, Ben Jun is well aware of my own body, I only need to go into seclusion to recuperate. Hearing Di Mingju say that is fine, and seeing his calm and composed appearance, everyone breathes a sigh of relief. But at this time, Di Mingju's cold voice suddenly rings out, Mo Rufeng, how did you know that Ben Jun is in the Yenwu continent? How can he get close to the universe mirror? Hearing this, old man Ji's body suddenly trembled, and his face immediately turned ashen. It's been nearly a month since Di Mingju left. The competition of the Nether Flame Army finally came to an end. In the end, more than 1,000 Nether Flame Army elites obtained the Spirit Molding Pill. As for the other members of the Nether Flame Army, they received the Spiritual Cultivation Pill. At this time, in the Yenwu continent, no one knows that in the coming year the number of people who ascended to the Immortal Cultivation continent would increase exponentially. In the end, more than 3,000 people successfully molded their spiritual roots and followed Muyan's footsteps to the Xiozhen continent. Even those who stayed behind had their cultivations advance by leaps and bounds, becoming a tyrant of the Yenwu continent. Very soon, Jun Muyan and her Nether Flame Army will become a legend. In the Yenwu continent, it is a miracle that no one has ever done before, and no one will be able to surpass. Your injury is no longer a problem. Mu Yang withdraws her hand from Chang Yu's wrist and gently says, now that your Dantian has been activated, internal force can no longer be used. The Yenwu continent is no longer suitable for your survival. Chang Yu, I have already expelled the desolate qi from your body. It is time for you to return to the place that belongs to you. Chang Yu's body tensed up. His gaze unblinkingly falls on Muyan. Miss, I don't want to go. Muyan smiles faintly, you don't belong here. The barren air of the Yenwu continent will only corrode your spiritual root little by little. Furthermore, there will be a day when the Nether Flame Army and I will head to the cultivation continent. At that time, we will meet again. Now, many people in the Hellflame Valley had noticed Chang Yu's change and incompatibility. His appearance had almost no resemblance to before. That ordinary face had been replaced by a resolute face that seemed to have been carved out by a chisel. This was all because Chang Yu's previous cultivation, appearance, and memories had all been sealed. Now that his Dantian had been unsealed, Chang Yu's appearance had gradually recovered, and even his memories had returned bit by bit. Chang Yu remembered his sect, his family, and his hatred. Yes, he should go back to the cultivation world that belonged to him. Chapter 8:20. He couldn't bear to part with the Nether Flame Army, couldn't bear to part with his little master, couldn't bear to part with his brothers, and even more couldn't bear to part with this woman in front of him. Mu Yang's expression is calm. She looks at him calmly and slowly says, Chang Yu, you should understand that I can't give you any response, and I don't want you to have any false expectations. I don't like you. I don't like you. 5 words, resolute and decisive, leaving no room for negotiation. Chang Yu felt as if his heart had been ruthlessly slashed by a knife, dripping with blood. But the pain was so satisfying. He already knew that he didn't have any extravagant hopes, but at this moment, he finally lost all hope. Instead, he felt an indescribable sense of relief. Chang Yu laughed softly. He rarely laughed, and his expression was always indifferent and distant, as if he was incompatible with everything in the world. But when he smiled, he gave off a gentle feeling of peace and happiness. Miss, I've never had any wishful thinking. I just want to guard you, guard little master, and live like that with the Nether Flame Army. I know you won't like me, but you can't stop my feelings for you. Even I can't stop myself. I'm sorry, miss. Can you please allow me to stay in the Nether Flame Army and stay by your and little master's side? Mu Yang is a little startled. Chang Yu's calm, sorrowful, and humble request made her heart uncomfortable. After a long while, she stood up and said with a smile, "What nonsense are you talking about? You've always been a member of the Nether Flame Army, one of the captains of the Ink Camp. You don't need anyone's permission to remain here, and no one has the right to expel you." After saying that, she didn't say anything else and turned to leave. Chang Yu stared blankly at her back as she left, then chuckled softly. This was great. He could still stay in the Nether Flame Army and protect her. This was really great. Chang Yu stretched out his hand and suddenly took out a flickering light blue flower from his bosom. He murmured, "Miss, happy birthday. Muyan's birthday has long passed." However, the Agerasia flower that he had personally picked was a birthday gift that could never be given away. Mu Yang returned to her room and quickly entered the space. Xiaobao had been in seclusion since 3 days ago. His current cultivation base was already at high levels Yantian realm. If there were no accidents, he would be at the peak of the innate realm. Next, he would temper his body and soul and ascend to the cultivation continent. Although he doesn't know when Di Mingju will return, but if he can ascend to the Xiuzhen continent. At the very least, she can be a little closer to Di Mingju, a little closer. Mu Yang gently caresses Xiao Bao's little face, then she looks at the fat rabbit that has already grown a lot of white fur. He casually tossed a few pills to it. The fat rabbit howled and pounced over, pulling the pill over and chewing on it like it was candy. Qiu, who was watching from the side, was extremely envious. She also wanted to eat candy, however, Little Phoenix was only a spiritual body now and could only draw power from Little Bao. And he couldn't eat anything. Every time she saw the fat rabbit holding a large pile of delicious food and eating heartily, she would be so jealous that her face contorted. Mu Yang looks at the little guys for a while, and her expression suddenly changes. He quickly left the space. Just as she returned to her room, a black shadow silently descended from the sky. Mu Yang's pupils suddenly contract. Chapter 821. In the room, a powerful pressure filled the air. She only sensed the arrival of this person at the very last moment. "Miss Jun." It was a masked man dressed in black. His voice was hoarse and coarse, filled with urgency. "My lord has been seriously injured. Please come with me to treat him." "What did you say?" Muyan's complexion greatly changes. Di Mingju was seriously injured. How did he get hurt? However, the black-clothed masked man did not say anything else. With a shake of his body, he disappeared on the spot. Mu Yang frowns. From this black-clothed man, she indeed felt the same aura as Ying Mai and the others. It was not the circulation of spiritual power, but the essence, qi, and spirit emitted from the body. It was as if they were born from the same land and the same qi of heaven and earth. This person should also be from the Xiuzhen continent. Could it be that Di Mingju was really injured? As soon as she thinks of this possibility, Muyan's brain seems to explode with a loud bang, unable to think of anything else. She didn't even think about it as her figure swayed and she directly chased after the aura left behind by the black-robed man. 2 figures streaked across the Hellflame Valley like meteors. No one could see their movements, and no one noticed their departure. Only Chang Yu, who was standing quietly under the moonlight, seemed to sense something and abruptly raised his head. He frowned and muttered, "Miss. Was that Mrs. Aura just now?" After saying those words, Chang Yu hesitated for only an instant before quickly following after them. Mu Yang follows the black-clothed man all the way to the depths of the Wuwang Mountains. The deeper they go, the calmer Mu Yan's mind, which was originally unable to think because of anxiety, becomes. Is Di Ming Ju seriously injured? Although this man has the aura of the Shoshen continent, is he really Di Ming Ju's subordinate? If Di Ming Ju was injured, why didn't he come to Hellflame Valley? Instead, they sent him into the dangerous Wuwang Mountains. Everything was so wrong. But Mu Yang still followed them. The newcomer's strength is high and his origins are unknown. The people of Yenwu continent are far from being able to contend with him. If they were to fight in the Nether Flame Valley, perhaps the other party would suffer from the backlash of the Heavenly Tao, but the Nether Flame army would also suffer heavy losses. This is what Mu Yan doesn't want to see. Moreover, she still held on to a glimmer of hope. What if Di Ming Ju is really injured? The moonlight shines like a chain. Tonight, the Wuwang Mountains are strangely quiet. All the mutated beasts seemed to have sensed danger and hid in their caves, not even a shadow appeared. The black-robed man finally stopped in his tracks and knelt respectfully towards the void. Honorable Envoy, I've managed to accomplish my mission. I've already lured them over. You did very well. In the dark night, an arrogant female voice sounded. Mu Yang slowly raised her head and saw a masked woman dressed in white standing on a hill not far away. Those eyes are looking at Mu Yang with contempt and coldness. It was Lung Qingwan's personal maidservant, Furong. Behind Hibiscus, there were a few men dressed in the same clothes as the black-clothed man. Each and every one of them is staring at Mu Yan like a tiger watching its prey. With a wave of the masked woman's hand, these people immediately rush down the hill and surround Mu Yan. Furong's gaze then fell on the black-clothed man who lured Mu Yan here. She smiled and said, Elder Qi, as long as you can kill that bitch Jun Mu Yan today, I will report this to young master. You and the Evolution Moon sect will definitely benefit from it. Chapter 822. Hibiscus no longer pays attention to him, instead looking at Mu Yan. Her line of sight roams around her face, and a trace of deep jealousy floats up in her eyes. You're Jun Mu Yan? A mere lowly mortal, how could she have such an appearance? Did this slut use this foxy face to seduce the emperor? If she had this face, wouldn't Di Jun have a whole new level of respect for her? Mu Yan coldly looks at her. What is your relationship with Di Ming Ju? Why did you use him to trick me to come here? Impudent. Hibiscus flies into a rage. Di Jun's name isn't something that a lowly servant like you can casually call. Mu Yan rolls her eyes, and bluntly says, Who do you think you are? Whether I call Di Ming Ju by name or not, what does it have to do with you? When Di Ming Ju didn't object, what qualifications do you have to babble about? Hearing that, Hibiscus's voice changes in anger. Lowly servant, death is at hand, yet you're still so shameless. Since that's the case, I'll let the four of you understand. My young master is Di Jun's fiancé. Recently, I learned that Di Jun was actually seduced by a lowly servant like you in this filthy place of the Yenwu continent. After my young master learned about it, she threw a big tantrum, wanting to break off the engagement with Di Jun. Di Jun naturally went back in person and coaxed our young master, letting her temper subside a bit. As for you, a lowly servant who shamelessly seduced someone else's fiancé, naturally, you couldn't stay. That's why the young master sent me down to clean you up. Hibiscus's words are like a heavy hammer, pounding on Mu Yan's heart, making her complexion turn deathly pale in a split second. It seems like it's also at this moment that she realizes she actually doesn't understand anything about Di Ming Ju. No matter where this person comes from, what kind of past and present he has, what does Di Jun of the polar domain mean, whether or not he's engaged, whether or not his parents agree to be together with him. She's completely clueless about all of this. Hibiscus looks at her face and immediately reveals a carefree smile, unhurriedly saying, You should know, when young master issued me an order to get rid of you, lowly servant, Di Jun was by her side, comforting her. But the emperor didn't say a word. You, a mere lowly mortal, don't really think that you can become the mistress of the polar domain just by climbing onto the bed of the emperor monarch, right? You. What qualifications do you have to be compared to our young master? Our young lord and the arch-emperor are well matched in terms of social status, and their statuses are comparable. What about you? You can't even compare to an outer disciple who is in charge of sweeping. The more Hibiscus spoke, the more excited she became. But suddenly, a cold and indifferent female voice interrupted her. Are you done with your nonsense? Furong stares blankly, looking at Muyin in disbelief. Her face was still snow-white, but there was no trace of shame or sadness on her face. There was only coldness. Especially that pair of peach blossom eyes, it was like a bottomless cold pond. Just looking at it made people shiver. Furong was awed by the look in her eyes. She suddenly came back to her senses and was filled with disbelief. She was shocked by a mortal just now? How was this possible? What fiancé? Don't tell me that this fiancé was bestowed by your young master due to his own wishful thinking. Furong's complexion suddenly stiffens. Chapter 823. Muyin sneers. Turns out, it's just a rotten peach blossom of Di Mingju, that's all. She casually brushed her long hair, her every movement exuding an indescribable elegance and nobility. Hibiscus was clearly looking down at her from above, but she unexpectedly felt a sense of inferiority. Muyin carelessly looks at her, her smile full of ridicule. I know that my family's Di Mingju is outstanding, and there are always those women who think they're in love who want to throw themselves at him. It's just that he didn't expect that there's such a shameless woman in the Yanwu continent, but there's even one in the Shoshen continent. How ugly and useless is your young master? He can't get married, so he has to stick to someone else's man? In the dark of the night, the Wuwang Mountains were deathly silent. Hibiscus and the surrounding black-clothed people all look terrified and aghast as they stare at Muyin. You slut, don't talk nonsense. Our young master is the Celestial Emperor's fiancé. Mu Yang sneers. Just because you say she's your fiancé, she's your fiancé? You asked Di Mingju, did he agree? If you have the guts, tell him to come out and admit to me that he already has a fiancé. Otherwise, if your young master isn't being overly sentimental and shameless, then what is it? Furong was so scared that she almost fainted. Because she knew that Lung Qingwan was currently in the Tianyi Men, using the Tianyi Men's most valuable treasure, the 1,000-mile mirror, to observe every movement here. The young master can clearly hear every word that Jun Muyin says. Hibiscus could not imagine at this time just how angry was the young master in front of the 1,000-mile mirror. In fact, these people might even suffer the wrath of the enraged young master and end up in a miserable state. Originally, Hibiscus had come here to atone for her crimes. But who in the Shoshen continent would want to come to this Yanwu continent? In particular, if they stayed in this damned place for a long time, the desolate qi would slowly corrode their meridians and dantian. Once a spiritual body was eroded by the desolate qi, it would take at least a few decades to recover. Furong's cultivation in Tianyi Men wasn't high in the first place. Going back this time would result in even more disastrous losses, but she had no choice but to come. Otherwise, her future would be completely ruined. And all of this is caused by this lowly servant before him, Jun Muyin. An intense killing intent burst out from Hibiscus's eyes as she gnashed her teeth and said, "Lowly maid, you're just taking advantage of this moment to show off your eloquence. In a moment, I want you to kneel at my feet and weep and repent for what you just said." Muyin raises her hand and the Tian Mo Qin appears in it. The sound of the zither rang out, and the wind whistled. In an instant, Hibiscus and the black-clothed man's expressions changed. Hibiscus's eyes suddenly light up with a scorching light, her gaze practically glued to the Tian Mo Qin. This is the sacred object of the Kamikaze school, the most precious treasure of heaven and earth, the Tian Mo Qin? Hibiscus's voice trembled. She leaned forward slightly as if she was itching to pounce on him. "Give it to me, Jun Muyin, immediately give me the zither in your hand. I might be able to leave your corpse intact." Muyin's fingers moved lightly, and the sound of the zither spun and finally floated in the air. Even Muyin's figure seems like it could fly away at any time. Her sharp and languid gaze falls on Hibiscus and the black-clothed man, her fingertips lightly plucking the strings. "If you want the Tian Mo Qin, then come and snatch it yourself if you have the ability." Xiuxian continent, Tianyi men. Boom. The tables and chairs in the main hall burst into pieces under the powerful pressure. Chapter 824. Slut. 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 How dare you humiliate me, Leng Qingwan. She is the dignified young master of Tianyi men, a goddess that many immortals yearn for, an existence that many people envy. And Zhan Muyan? She's just a mortal from the lowliest world, an ant-like existence. What qualifications does she have to laugh at her? What qualifications does she have to mock her? Young master, please calm down. Ling Lan and Lu Zhu kneel behind Leng Qingwan, saying repeatedly that Zhan Muyan is nothing more than a mortal who hasn't ascended. Even if hibiscus is no good, she can certainly cripple her. At that time, how you want to deal with that slut, isn't it up to you, young master? That's right, young master. You have a precious body, why bother with that kind of lowly servant? It wouldn't bring disgrace to your status. Leng Qingwan takes a deep breath, her eyes once again focusing on the Qianli mirror. Just then, the girl in the mirror flips her wrist, and a zither appears, the sound of the zither clanging. Seeing the Tianmo Qin in Muyan's hands, Leng Qingwan's pupils suddenly contract. She almost blurts out, Tianmo Qin. Behind her, Ling Lan and Lu Zhu also look excited. Young master, the Tianmo Qin, the most precious Tianmo Qin of the Shun music sect is still here. Back then, the Shun musicians could make the three realms tremble with fear. Apart from the crafty and insidious skills of the Shun musicians, it was also because of this Tianmo Qin that could move unhindered under the heavens, no one could match it. If my Tianyi men could obtain this Tianmo Qin, and with the skills of the Shun musicians, young master, in the future, Leng Qingwan's gaze is frighteningly hot. Even the anger, shame, and jealousy from just now turn into a strong greed for the Tianmo Qin and the skills of the Shun musicians at this moment. With all of this, she can not only dominate the world like the Shun musicians in those days. She can also make the emperor look at her in a new light, and even take the initiative to beg her. Her slender fingers, smeared with blood-red cardamom, press on the Qianli mirror, and quickly draw a rune. That's an order to Hibiscus. Kill Zhan Muyan at all costs, seize the Tianmo Qin and the Shun musicians' inheritance. Even if Leng Qingwan didn't give this order, Furong would still be itching to dismember Muyan's body into 1,000 pieces at this moment, and then take that ancient treasure, the Tianmo Qin. In Furong's mind, even if Zhan Muyan's talent and cultivation are pretty good, she's still just a mortal in the end. These black-clothed men were the elites of the Evolution Moon sect. Everyone's cultivation had long surpassed the level of Enidia. That's right, people from the upper realms have 90% of their strength suppressed in the Yenwu continent. He couldn't use his spiritual power without restraint, nor could he cast powerful spells. They might even suffer a backlash from the erosion of the barren qi. However, spirit cultivators were spirit cultivators after all. They were fundamentally different from mortals. Not to mention anything else, just the aura released by a spirit cultivator was enough to cause the entire world to tremble. To the mortals of the Yenwu continent, it would pose a fatal threat. After Furong gave the order, Elder Qi, who was the leader of the group, didn't make a move. Instead, he directed the disciples to attack. However, Zhan Muyan's strength far exceeded his expectations. A figure flew out and crashed into a rock. His face turned pale, and he spurted a mouthful of blood. Elder Qi glanced at him, and his brows furrowed. That person was his favorite disciple, and his cultivation was already at the 8th level of Enidia. But unexpectedly, he couldn't withstand 3 moves from Zhan Muyan. Chapter 825. Elder Qi takes a deep look at Muyan, and says in a deep voice, "I really underestimated you. That being the case, let me see for myself how powerful the Shun musician's successor is." Almost as soon as Elder Qi's voice falls, Muyan's expression suddenly congeals. The zither in her hand spins, emitting 7 colored rays of light. 7 Sword Spirit activates. At the same time, Elder Qi's attack arrives. In the Yenwu continent, most of the weapons in the Xiuzhen world are unusable. That's because there's no 5-star spiritual energy between heaven and earth here, only a thick aura of desolation. But Elder Chi is holding a bronze-yellow circular object in his hand, and he doesn't know what it is. As he soars into the air, the spiritual energy within his body is operating. That circular object suddenly expands, and it quickly soars into the air. The next moment, countless icicles fall down like a rainstorm. There's a crackling sound, accompanied by a burst of dust and grass flying. But immediately, these dust and grass are frozen in the air. The temperature within a 100-meter radius dropped to freezing point in an instant. Even the 7 swords surrounding Muyin seem to be frozen by this frost, their light dimming little by little. But the disciples of the derived moon sect aren't affected by this frost in the slightest. The long sword in their hands whistles, spiritual energy frantically operating. The pace under their feet seems to have suddenly sped up dozens of times. In a flash, they've already rushed in front of Muyin, who is frozen and unable to move. Swish, 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 swish. Countless sharp swords containing spiritual energy stab towards Muyin. Hibiscus stands high on the hill, the corners of her mouth hooking up into a cruel and disdainful smile. Compared to the trash of the Yenwu continent, Jun Muyin's talent and cultivation may indeed be considered pretty good. But to fight against the Tianyi men and the young master, that's a real joke. Just the attacks of a few small fries of the derived moon sect can already pierce her heart with 1,000 arrows, dying without a burial ground. But the next moment, Hibiscus hears the cries of alarm of the derived moon sect's disciples. Ah, my spiritual energy, why is my spiritual energy frantically disappearing? What did you do to us? All the derived moon sect's disciples surrounding Muyin and attacking her have frightened expressions. Their faces, which were originally filled with complacency and excitement, turned deathly pale. Their bodies trembled uncontrollably. Even the frost released by Elder Chi, which originally had no effect on them, was crawling up their bodies bit by bit. Elder Chi's expression changed drastically. He waved his hand, wanting to pull his disciple back. His spiritual aura was powerful, and in a split second, 3 disciples were swept back by him. But the remaining dozen or so people seemed to stick around Mu Yang. His expression grew more and more terrified, and his body trembled more and more. A moment later, wounds began to appear on those people's bodies. And these scars were exactly the same as the shape of the swords they attacked. At the same time, accompanied by the intermittent sound of the zither, a silver-white light shines brighter and brighter on Muyin's body. Shocked and furious, Elder Chi was about to leap up. Suddenly, there was a loud bang. The dozen or so disciples flew out and fell heavily to the ground. His body twitched, and his eyes rolled back into his head. He was no longer able to get up. As the white light dissipates, Muyin's figure appears. Chapter 8:26. Her face was paler than rice paper, and her body was so weak that it seemed like she could collapse at any time. However, a cold smile slowly appeared on her beautiful face. After Divine Hand weaves the heavens leveled up, it's truly frightening. After Mu Yang's Shen musician skills reached the 3rd level, many of her skills have also been upgraded. This included Divine Hands, which could only form a protective barrier. The current Divine Hands could not only form a protective barrier, but they could also reflect and absorb enemy attacks. However, if the enemy's cultivation was stronger than hers, she would definitely be able to defeat them. Mu Yang will bear the overflowing damage. Therefore, Mu Yang had killed more than half of the people from the derived moon sect with this strike. But in reality, she had also paid a high price for it. Elder Chi's eyes are lifeless. He didn't think that killing a mortal of the Yenwu continent, a task that he thought he could easily complete, would be a task. He had actually lost so many of his elites. He suddenly glares at Muyin, his eyes almost spitting fire. How dare you kill my sect's people? Bitch, I'll take your life right now. Elder Chi suddenly soared into the sky. The strange weapon in his hand seemed to be summoned by him as it suddenly grew bigger. But this time, it wasn't an icicle that fell. Instead, it was a raging fire. Along with the raging flames, Elder Chi's attack was also like the pressure of Mount Tai. Mu Yang only feels as if the ground under her feet has turned into blazing lava. The soles of his shoes were burned through, and the soles of his bare feet were scarred. But she didn't even have time to care about the injury on her foot. Elder Chi's attack was like a torrential storm, accompanied by scorching flames, not giving her a chance to breathe. In the face of absolute power. No matter how many techniques there were, they were just fancy decorations. The scars on Muyen's body increase one by one, and the spiritual energy and internal force within her body dry up little by little. On the other hand, Elder Chi's attacks were like a never-ending storm. At any time, this lonely boat of hers would be smashed into pieces. Hibiscus finally felt at ease when she saw this scene. This time, Jun Muyen is bound to die. Elder Chi, who was attacking crazily, had the same thought. However, a cup of tea had passed. A quarter of an hour passed. Half an hour had passed. Elder Chi's attacks are still like a violent storm. Muyang's figure is still dyed red with blood, on the verge of collapse. But, she actually didn't fall. Elder Chi's face was filled with fear. What was going on? What the hell was going on? This woman's blood should have been drained long ago, and her spiritual power should have been used up long ago. But why hadn't she collapsed? Elder Chi could already feel that the spiritual energy in his body was getting lesser and lesser, gradually drying up. However, the young girl who he thought would soon collapse and become a fish on his chopping block was still stubbornly standing. He didn't believe it. He doesn't believe that he, a dignified elder of the derived moon sect, can't even kill a mortal of the Yenwu continent. An angry roar. Elder Chi gathered the remaining spiritual energy in his body, and the magic weapon in the air suddenly returned to him. It turned into a long spear and shot towards Muyang's chest. Demon woman, go to hell. However, there was no sound of a sharp blade piercing through flesh, and the scene of blood splattering did not appear again. Elder Chi felt the spear in his hand being obstructed by a force, unable to move forward. Chapter 8:27. The girl's voice is hoarse and weak, but it carelessly and softly rings in his ear. All right, I've let you show off for so long. Now, it should be my turn, right? Elder Chi's eyes suddenly widen, a little bit of fear emerging in the depths of his eyes. This woman, what is she saying? Such a thought just flashes through his mind. Elder Chi feels a seven-colored light flickering in front of him, merging into one. He can't even clearly see what it is, but he feels a tearing pain in his chest. Elder Chi instinctively wants to use spiritual power to resist the attack, but in the next moment, fear emerges in his eyes. His dantian is completely empty, without a trace of spiritual power remaining. And in the Yenwu continent, it's impossible to absorb even a trace of spiritual power from the air. No, this isn't. A hoarse voice comes out of Elder Chi's mouth, but it's immediately drowned out by a large amount of blood. Elder Chi's mouth keeps spilling blood. He slowly lowers his head, only to see his empty chest. His heart, bang. His tall and sturdy figure falls down, smashing into a cloud of dust. Elder Chi is dead. Hibiscus simply can't believe her eyes. Even the veil on her face has long been torn off, revealing a malevolent and horrified expression. This Jun Muyen, she actually killed Elder Chi? One must know that even though Elder Chi is only a person from the Shozhen continent, his true strength is no less than hers. Hibiscus's body can't help but tremble. But very soon, she sees that Jun Muyen, who killed Elder Chi, is swaying, unable to support herself any longer, and falls down. Hibiscus cautiously approaches Muyen. After confirming that there isn't a trace of spiritual power left in her body, that her body is riddled with scars, and that she's on the verge of death, Hibiscus shows a carefree smile. That's right. Even if this Jun Muyen is more powerful, even if she could really kill Elder Chi. But how could she not pay a little price? Hibiscus looks down at Muyen from above, and even gives her a ruthless kick. Jun Muyen, if you want to die happily, then immediately hand over the Shun musician inheritance. Otherwise, I'll make you wish you were dead. Muyen's eyes droop, her breathing almost non-existent, as if she's already dead. Hibiscus snorted coldly and was filled with disdain. Her eyes turn and fall on the Tianmo Qin. The zither looked old and plain, without any luster. However, Hibiscus's eyes lit up, her eyes filled with greed and excitement. This is the ancient treasure that makes everyone go crazy, Tianmo Qin Ah. Hibiscus's hand slowly reaches for the Tianmo Qin, then she holds it in her arms. The Tianmo Qin doesn't react at all, but it remembers the formidable strength that Muyan had just displayed when she used it. Hibiscus's heartbeat quickened uncontrollably. Jun Muyan is just a lowly mortal. With the Tianmo Qin and the Shun musician inheritance, she can become so powerful. What if she obtains the Tianmo Qin and the Shun musician inheritance? Would she become even more powerful than the young lord? Would she also gain the favor of the celestial emperor? Hibiscus's eyes were filled with intoxication and greed. She doesn't even notice that the strings of the Tianmo Qin that she's holding in her arms aren't being strummed, but they're gently undulating. The lingering sound of the zither rang in her ears, as if it was weeping and complaining. Chapter 828. He murmurs, Tian Yi Men, Leng Qingwan is nothing. As long as I become the successor of the Shun musicians, I can also obtain the emperor's love. I can also obtain everything. Ha ha, ha ha ha, Furong laughed wildly. He simply doesn't notice that the Tianmo Qin in his hand is flashing with a 7-colored radiance. Immediately, it transformed into a translucent long sword and pierced through Hibiscus's body. Ah! Hibiscus let out a blood-curdling scream. The 7 Absolute's sword flies back to Mu Yang, turns back into the Tianmo Qin, and then disappears into Mu Yang's body. She staggered to her feet. This time, it was her turn to look down at Furong. Didn't anyone teach you not to touch other people's things? If he moved, he would have to pay a heavy price. A bloody hole appeared in Hibiscus's chest. Just like Elder Qi, there was nothing there. His heart had exploded. She unwaveringly glares at Mu Yang, her voice hoarse and broken. How could it be? You're just a mortal. How could it be? The last breath was stuck in her throat, and Hibiscus completely stopped breathing. Mu Yang let out a long sigh. All the pain and powerlessness in her body surged up in an instant. She had used up almost all of her energy in this battle. If it weren't for the restrictions of the Yenwu continent, it could be said that she has no chance of winning against these people who are far more powerful than her. But no matter what, she had one now. Mu Yang takes out the elixir and puts it in her mouth. Suddenly, his expression changed drastically. In the night sky of the Wuwang Mountains, a strong wind suddenly blew. Muyan raises her head and sees that the originally pitch-black horizon has been dug out by someone at some unknown time. The whirlpool in the cave surged as if it was connected to another world. Then, 3 figures flashed out of the cave. The leader of the group was a masked woman whose entire body was snow white. His entire body exuded an arrogant and cold temperament. Behind her stood 2 maidservants, one dressed in blue and the other in green. Useless thing, you can't even deal with a lowly bitch, and even the young master has to personally take action. Ling Lan glanced at Furong's corpse in disgust. And she even dared to draw a portrait of the monarch. She died just like that. She really got off lightly. Leng Qingwan's gaze falls on Muyan. He was aloof, cold, and disdainful, and he seemed like he was looking at an ant that he could crush at any moment. Jun Muyan, do you think that if you can climb onto God Monarch's bed, you will definitely be able to soar into the sky and be blessed with glory? Muyan raises her eyes to look at Leng Qingwan. She couldn't even stand steadily and could faint at any time. However, there was no trace of fear on her face. Instead, the corners of her mouth curled up to reveal a mocking smile. So, you're that self-delusional fiancé. Leng Qingwan's eyes flashed with a strong killing intent, but soon after, it turned into a condescending pity. Death is near at hand, but your courage is not small. No wonder you would shamelessly seduce Monarch. However, you're still a bastard. In my eyes, your life is worth less than an ant's. If I want to kill you now, it might be easier than killing an ant. You should be very clear about this. Leng Qingwan chuckled, but don't worry, I won't kill you yet. In reality, the moon spiritual root in your body is rarely seen in this world. Furthermore, you are born with such a foxy and seductive nature. If I were to give you to some influential person who likes to cultivate in demonic arts, I believe it would not be a bad idea. Chapter 829. At that time, Di Jun and I will live together, a loving husband and wife, and you can only moan under a different man. Lung Qingwan's voice is faint and cold, as if she's just casually narrating. But in fact, her words contain a powerful soul-sucking power. She saw Jun Muyan kill Furong and the Elder of the Flowing Moon sect with her own eyes in the Qianli mirror. Lung Qingwan's hatred towards Jun Muyan grows, but she also longs for the Shun musician inheritance and the Tianmo Qin. She firmly believes that Jun Muyan, as a lowly mortal, has such strength, and it must be due to the Shun musician inheritance. Di Jun falling in love with her must also be because of the Shun musician inheritance. What if she was the one who obtained this inheritance? Lung Qingwan's heart is full of fiery desire. So much so that she suppresses the desire to kill Muyan immediately. Instead, she hopes to provoke her with words, and control her with the soul-sucking spell when her mind is agitated and angry. Let her become his slave puppet. At that time, the Shun musician inheritance and the Tianmo Qin will be hers, and Jun Muyan will be at her mercy. Sure enough, under the attack of her words and mental power, Muyan's complexion becomes increasingly pale, her body is on the verge of collapse, and the light in her eyes is gradually replaced by confusion. Lung Qingwan's mouth hooks up into a cold smile. Just as she is about to continue, the corners of Muyan's mouth suddenly hooks up into a lazy curve. The careless voice softly speaks with ridicule. Now, I really have some sympathy for Di Mingju, to be fancied by such a self-delusional and crazy woman like you. You said that you and Di Mingju will be a loving husband and wife, and live together, and you're embarrassed. Did Di Mingju agree? Seeing your artificial face, won't he feel disgusted, and still be in love with you? Muyan slowly raises her head, the dazed and painful expression on her face has long disappeared without a trace. Her complexion is still pale, and her body is still weak, as if it could collapse at any time. But the smile on her mouth is lazy and noble, as if the one being despised as an ant isn't her, but Lung Qingwan. And these words of hers ruthlessly stab Lung Qingwan's heart. The scene of Di Mingju being cold and disgusted towards her, but caring and gentle towards Jun Muyan flashes before her eyes. Her face twisted as she gnashed her teeth and said, "Bitch, how dare you humiliate me?" Muyan sneers, her fingers lightly plucking the strings of the zither. A person will humiliate himself, and you will be humiliated by others. Since you've brought about your own humiliation, I will naturally help you. Oh, right, there's something else I forgot to tell you. Didn't you ask if Di Mingju would still want me if I was tainted and unclean? I'm really sorry, I had a child 5 years ago, but Di Mingju said that he didn't care. This fairy is really noble and elegant, pure as ice and jade. It's just a pity that my family's Di Mingju doesn't fancy you, and disdains you for being disgusting. What should we do then? Lung Qingwan could only feel the annoying sound of the zither ringing in her mind. And Muyan's words are like needles, stabbing into her heart. Her mind was like thunder echoing over and over again. Jun Muyan, that slut, once had a child, but Di Jun didn't care and still wanted her. As for himself, she was infatuated with the emperor, and her status was 100 times higher than this slut's, but the emperor only felt disgust and hatred towards her. Why? In what way is she inferior to this slut? Finally, Zhang. The sound of the zither resounds. Chapter 830. Young Mistress. Ling Lan and Green Bamboo cried out in alarm, hurriedly supporting her. Lung Qingwan heaved a sigh of relief. She sensed that she had consumed more than half of her spiritual power, as well as her severely injured primordial spirit. He roared, "Kill her! Kill this bitch! She wants Muyan to die. Even if he doesn't want the Shun musician inheritance, he must let this slut die without a burial ground. She hates Jun Muyan for getting Di Mingju's affection that she could only yearn for even in her dreams. But what makes her crazily jealous and hateful is that she had just gathered all of her mental power to attack Muyan. She thought that it was a sure win, but she didn't expect that not only was Jun Muyan not affected in the slightest, she was instead killed by Jun Muyan. What did this mean? Could it be that this slut's psychic power was stronger than hers? How could Lung Qingwan accept such an outcome? Ling Lan and Lu Zhu receive the order and simultaneously soar up. The long swords in their hands carry a formidable pressure as they stab straight towards Muyan. After Muyan's zither counterattacked Lung Qingwan, the last bit of strength in her body was also drained away. She stood there quietly, looking at the long sword that was about to take her life. His eyes were calm, but there was a hint of reluctance in them. 7 brilliants, she said softly in her heart. I'll dissolve the contract with you right now and set you free. Don't forget what you promised me. Protect Xiao Bao for me. 7 brilliants was silent for a moment before he slowly said, if you take the initiative to terminate the contract with me, your soul will scatter and you will never be able to reincarnate. But as long as you refine my primordial spirit, the Tian Mo Qin's power will completely erupt. These scum would all die. Are you sure you won't consider it? Muyan hooks up the corners of her lips, revealing a gentle and affectionate smile. Qi Huang, you always talk so much nonsense. Erupting the Tian Mo Qin's full power might be able to kill the person in front of him. However, 7 brilliants would once again fall into a deep slumber, his mind and soul injured. The most important thing is that the Yanwu continent will be annihilated. She couldn't even bear to injure the people of the Nether Flame Army in the Battle of Hell Flame Valley. How could she bear to let the Yanwu continent and the people she cares about on this main road be annihilated? Mu Yang suddenly closes her eyes, clenches her hands into fists, and slowly loosens them. 2 totem marks slowly appeared on her palms. I, Jun Muyan, today use my soul as a sacrifice, my life as a vow, to dissolve the Tian Mo Qin. In the space of the Tian Mo Qin, the red-clothed youngster stands alone in the green field. A pair of bottomless phoenix eyes stared unblinkingly at the young girl outside. A cold and resolute vow was spat out from his thin lips. As long as the oath is made, he can cancel the master-servant contract with Muyan without paying any price. Qi Huang was never willing to become a servant of filthy humans. However, as an artifact spirit, it had no other choice. At this moment, he was finally going to regain his freedom. However, as Qi Huang stared blankly at the lonely figure in the dark night, he didn't feel the slightest bit carefree. A vague image flashed through his mind and then disappeared without a trace. 7 brilliants stretched out his hand, his eyes blurred as if he wanted to stop something. Just then, before Mu Yang could finish chanting the incantation, Green Bamboo and Ling Lan's attacks had already arrived. The long sword descends from the sky, aiming straight for the top of Muyan's skull. 7 brilliants didn't even think about it and struck out with his palm. In an instant, the incantation to dissolve the contract was interrupted. Green Bamboo and Ling Lan's swords were also swept to the side. Chapter 831. Muyan stares blankly, looking down at her palm where the light has disappeared. Anger finally appears on her calm face. Qi Huang, what are you doing? Didn't we agree on the conditions? Can't this sage go back on his word? In the space, Qi Huang sits down on the lawn and disdainfully says, this sage doesn't want to cancel the contract with you. This sage intends to die with you and your son. The blue veins on Muyan's forehead throb, almost wanting to curse out loud. This son of a bitch, who wants to die with him, how could she allow her baby to die? But it's all too late. Ling Lan and Lu Zhu make a comeback. The wind whistles, and the 2 swords burst into blazing flames. Muyan closes her eyes in despair, cursing Qi Huang, that willful bastard, 1,000 times in her heart. Her divine sense sinks into the space, and what she sees is Xiao Bao's adorable appearance as he sits cross-legged with his eyes closed. How she wants to see her baby grow up, how she wants to accompany him to old age. But she didn't expect that even if she's reborn, they would only have a short 5-year mother-son bond. Muyan's spiritual tentacles gently caress Xiao Bao's white and tender cheeks, then resolutely and thoroughly seals the space. Her death will cause the space to collapse, but the Tian Mo Qin won't disappear. Perhaps, her baby still has a chance of survival. The moment Muyan seals the space, Xiao Bao suddenly opens his eyes and murmurs, Nyang Qin. Just as Muyan's divine sense leaves the space, the swords have already whistled in front of her. Ling Lan and Lu Zhu's cultivation is far higher than Elder Qi and Furong's. Even in her heyday, Muyin doesn't think that she can deal with them. What's more, at this time, she doesn't have the slightest bit of spiritual power and internal force in her body. Muyin slowly closes her eyes, waiting for death to come. However, the expected pain of being burned and pierced by the flames doesn't come. Instead, Muyin feels a warm energy envelop her. She opens her eyes and sees a tall figure blocking in front of her. That figure has been pierced by Ling Lan and Lu Zhu's swords. The flames burn on his wounds, making a sizzling sound as his flesh is scorched and his blood is evaporating. However, he didn't even flinch as he firmly protected her behind him. Muyin's pupils suddenly contract, her chapped lips slightly open, and her hoarse voice seems to break. Chang. You, her voice caused the body in front of her to sway and slowly fall down. Ling Lan and Green Bamboo withdrew their swords and curled their lips in disdain. He's actually a spirit cultivator. Judging from the fluctuation of his spiritual power, he should be related to the Raging Flame sect. Oh, I didn't expect this bitch to be able to seduce so many men. They are so infatuated with her that they don't even want their lives. So what if she's capable? She's going to die anyway. Everything she has now will belong to our young master from now on. Mu Yang stares blankly at Chang Yu, who is lying in front of her. Her eyes seem to be dyed red by the blazing flames. With her psychic power, she could clearly sense that Chang Yu was losing his life force bit by bit. She wants to play the Tian Mo Qin, she wants to use the Saint of Benevolence to save his life. But now, there was not even a little bit of spiritual power in her body. She could only watch helplessly as Chang Yu walked towards his death, powerless to do anything. Why? Why did he have to risk his life to delay her survival for a moment? That was the everlasting youth flower. Chang Yu raises his head, looking for Mu Yang's face. He could no longer see anything in front of him, but the girl's bright and beautiful face was clearly imprinted in his mind. In the turbid and evil world, hell was boundless. The young girl, whose clothes were as white as snow and whose slender fingers plucked the strings of the zither, was like a ray of light that illuminated his chaotic and dark life. From then on, he sank into obsession and was consigned to eternal damnation, but he was willing to endure it. In just a blink of an eye, the Yanwu continent that was originally shrouded in silence and darkness is thoroughly illuminated. Heaven and earth shook. Lung Qingwan suddenly raised her head and looked at the strange phenomenon in the sky. Her expression changed greatly. 9 stars and the moon, the night is as dark as day. This is God-slaying tribulation. It's the God-slaying tribulation. Kill her. Hurry up and kill her. We can't let her cross the tribulation. Lung Qingwan's voice suddenly rose, almost breaking. His arrogant and cold face finally revealed a terrified expression. She wanted to immediately teleport away and return her primordial spirit to the immortal cultivation continent. However, the thunderclouds in the sky seemed to have completely locked down this area. No one could escape. Chapter 834. So far, even in the entire Shoshian continent, there are no more than 10 people who have survived the God-slaying tribulation. Every time the God-slaying tribulation fails, it will bring about a calamity of misery and suffering. Lung Qingwan is shocked and angry, her body can't help but tremble. Jun Muyin, this slut is just a mortal with a mere body forging stage cultivation. How could she possibly cross the God-slaying tribulation? Naturally, she can't succeed. But once she fails, all the holy spirits in the Wuwang Mountains, including Lung Qingwan and the other 2, will be buried with her. Even though it's only her primordial spirit avatar here. But once it's destroyed, Lung Qingwan's cultivation will directly lose half. How can she accept this? Now, the only way is to kill Jun Muyin before she attracts more of the God-slaying tribulation. Lung Qingwan's eyes are full of murderous intent. She suddenly soars into the sky, releasing a terrifying pressure. At this moment, she can no longer maintain her high and mighty elegance. She just wants to quickly kill this slut, Jun Muyan, and protect her own cultivation and life. Hearing this, Ling Lan and Lu Zhu are even more frightened. Lung Qingwan came to the Yenwu continent with her primordial spirit avatar, but they are the real body. If they are destroyed by the God-slaying tribulation, not only will they die, they will never be able to rise again. Thunder clouds roll over and over in the sky, reflecting colorful light. Thunder falls one after another, and each one can directly annihilate a mountain peak in the Wuwang Mountains. In the mountains, the mournful screams of strange beasts echo everywhere as they flee in fear. However, this mountain range seemed to have been cut off from the rest of the world and had become a cage where only death awaited. As Muyan's cultivation breaks through the bottleneck of the peak pre-celestial realm, the lightning tribulation will fall more and more frequently, until everything shrouded by the thunder clouds is destroyed. Under the moonlight, the girl in white is bathed in blood, but she stands proudly. She holds a small flower that emits a light blue light in her hand. After staring at it for a while, she carefully puts the flower in her bosom. Muyan raises her head. Her ears are filled with Lung Qingwan's angry shouts, Ling Lan and Lu Zhu's frightened and resentful shouts. Her mouth curls up into a cold and mocking smile. Don't you think of me as an ant and trash? Now, all of you are going to be buried with me, an ant. How do you feel? Jun Muyan, you're crazy. Lung Qingwan bellows, I order you to stop your advancement immediately, do you hear me? There's no way you can withstand the God-slaying tribulation. Do you want to die? Mu Yang raised her head to look at the sky. The terrifying power coming from the crystal-clear thunderclouds made her feel as if her soul was trembling in fear. Of course, she knew that she could not survive the God-slaying tribulation. As a matter of fact, she had no idea what a God-slaying tribulation was. However, the moment Chang Yu closed his eyes, a crazy killing intent surged in her chest. There was only one thought in her mind. She needed powerful strength. She wanted to kill this group of dregs and make everyone here accompany Chang Yu in death. After that, her cultivation finally broke through the critical point. Powerful energy burst forth from his body. What followed was God-slaying calamity. Chapter 835. As soon as her voice falls, the spiritual power within Mu Yang's body suddenly erupts. The Tianmo Qin in his hand flashes, instantly transforming into 7 long swords. 7 sword spirits, activated. The attacks of Ling Lan, Green Bamboo, and Lung Qingwan instantly fell on the 7 sword spirit. Mu Yang fiercely spits out a mouthful of blood, her frail body on the verge of collapse. But at the same time, the thunderclouds in the sky became thicker and thicker, and the tribulation lightning fell faster and faster. Finally, Ling Lan was struck by a bolt of tribulation lightning. He let out a blood-curdling screech. In an instant, not even a trace of his flesh could be seen before he was turned into ashes. Green Bamboo stared blankly at this scene, her face pale. The fear and despair brought by the shadow of death slowly surfaced in her eyes. No, I don't want to die. I don't want to die here. Jun Muyan, stop. Quickly stop. Green Bamboo's hair was disheveled, and even the sword in her hand was lost somewhere. Her face was ferocious like an evil spirit. She bared her fangs and brandished her claws as she pounced towards Mu Yang. Bitch, go die. How can I, a dignified immortal, die in this damned place? Mu Yang looks at her fiendish appearance as she pounces over, and only smiles coldly. He moved back a few meters. Blinding lightning flashed and thunder roared. A bolt of rainbow-colored lightning struck the spot where she had just been standing. Green Bamboo was just about to pounce on him when he suddenly raised his head. The ferocious expression on his face instantly turned into one of panic and despair. The short scream came to an abrupt end. The thunder and lightning blasted a huge hole in the ground. Dust and stones flew everywhere, and not even bones were left. But this time, Mu Yang was also affected a little. His clothes were scorched, and even his hair was slightly curled. Her face was frighteningly pale, and blood kept flowing from the corners of her mouth and the wounds on her body. With her frail body, she can only use the 7 absolute swords, transformed from the Tianmo Qin to barely support herself so that she won't collapse. However, when her line of sight meets Lung Qingwan's venomous and cold eyes, the corners of Muyan's mouth once again hooks up into a lazy and mocking smile. Lung Qingwan gritted her teeth. She didn't understand why this woman could still smile when death was at hand. Why wasn't he afraid at all? What she didn't understand even more was that as the dignified young master of Qianyi Men, dealing with a mortal woman should have been an easy task. But why was it that she still couldn't kill this bitch after spending so much effort, losing a few trusted subordinates, and even sacrificing her primordial spirit clone? The thunder in the sky grew louder and louder. The entire Wuwang Mountains had turned into a sea of fire and corpses. In just a little more time, this undulating mountain range would be completely razed to the ground. And now, the dense tribulation lightning was slowly approaching the two of them. There was no way to escape from this inescapable net. Lung Qingwan takes a deep breath, her face once again revealing a proud smile. Do you think that you've won just like that? You will definitely die under the god-slaying thunder tribulation, but I will only lose some cultivation. After you die, how long will the emperor remember you, and how long will he keep his chastity for you? Her lips curled up into a smug and cruel smile. In the end, you can only have everything you have if you're alive. There will be a day when the emperor will forget you, and be moved by my tenderness and companionship. At that time, I will still be the final winner. A trace of pain and absent-mindedness flashed through Muyan's eyes. Chapter 836. The 9 stars and the moon have been completely submerged by the thunderclouds. The dark night sky is still as bright as day, but what it brings is not vitality, but the abyss of death. Di Mingju, I'm really sorry, I can't fulfill my promise to stay with you for a lifetime. I'm really sorry for making you wait in vain. Mu Yang retracts her gaze, and it falls back on Lung Qingwan. She chuckles lowly. At this time, you still want to use the soul-absorbing spell on me. Should I say that you're stupid, or that there's something wrong with your brain? Was my previous proof not clear enough? This fairy, your mental power is far less powerful than mine. Why do you want to humiliate yourself again and again? Mu Yang's pupils shrink, a dark light flickers in her eyes. Lung Qingwan's complexion changes greatly. She suddenly holds her head, utters a mournful scream, and falls to the ground. Fresh blood flowed from her mouth and nose, making her originally beautiful face look like that of a malicious spirit. Lung Qingwan suddenly jumps up from the ground, and madly pounces towards Mu Yang. Slut, I'll kill you. Mu Yang wants to retreat, but the air suddenly condenses into ice. Her body, which was already riddled with scars, feels like it's filled with lead, and she can't move at all. Poochie. At this time, there's the sound of a sharp blade entering flesh. A severe pain comes from her abdomen. Lung Qingwan's ferocious blood-covered face is close at hand. Slut, this is the Xiozhen continent's one and only divine weapon, soul-binding dagger. It's useless for this fairy, but for a mortal like you, it can lock your soul, making you beg for death, unable to return to the afterlife. Mu Yang's face shows a painful expression. The dagger stabs into her abdomen, but it's like throwing a boulder into a calm lake, and in a split second, raging waves. Her 5 viscera and 6 bowels, her dantian and meridians, and her soul seem to be turned upside down at this moment. Lung Qingwan looks at her appearance and laughs. You, a mere mortal, want to compete with me? Who do you think you are? What right do you have to snatch my monarch? A lowly ant like you should obediently shrink in this dirty and disgusting place. What qualifications do you have to think about things that don't belong to you? Pa. A hand covered in blood grabs Lung Qingwan's wrist. Lung Qingwan's voice paused, and she suddenly met a pair of bottomless peach blossom eyes. The girl's voice was weak and hoarse, but it was still as beautiful as the sounds of nature. If we are ants, then you lofty, greedy, and selfish immortals who want to control the life and death of others are nothing more than disgusting and ugly maggots. Today, I finally know why the Shun musicians wanted to kill everyone in the Xiozhen continent. If the Xiozhen continent is filled with disgusting scum like you, then it would be better for all of them to die. Lung Qingwan flew into a rage. You lowly maid, you actually Before he could finish, a rumbling sound came from the sky. The expression on Lung Qingwan's face suddenly turned into one of panic. Let go, quickly let go of me, do you hear me? You slut, let go of this fairy. Do you know who I am? I am the heaven. I don't care who you are. Muyan smiles eerily. I only know that I've said it before, that all of you present must accompany my subordinates in death. Chapter 837. See you again. Never. No, don't. Let go of me, you slut. I'm going to kill you, Boom. The thunderclouds fall, the rocks tumble, the dust fills the air, and it turns into nothingness. Mu Yang only feels as if her whole body has been crushed by something, and she almost faints from the pain. But she's not dead yet. Lung Qingwan's body has already been reduced to ashes, not even her bones remain. But she's still alive. The 7 absolute swords beside her emits a faint light, shrouding her. That's the divine hand weaves the heavens, launching itself. In the nick of time, it actually managed to save her life. However, this slim chance of survival only allows her to linger at death's door for a moment. The light around the 7 absolute swords flashes, and eventually disappears without a trace, turning back into the appearance of the Tianmo Qin. Like an unremarkable zither, it falls to the ground at the side. Mu Yang lies powerlessly on the ground, looking at the thick thunderclouds in the sky, and slowly closes her eyes. Goodbye, Mingju. Goodbye, Xiao Bao. Nyang Qin. A crisp little voice rings in her ears. Mu Yang suddenly opens her eyes, and sees the little figure floating in the void. Her calm and indifferent face finally shows a look of panic. Xiao Bao. No, how could Xiao Bao leave the space? Didn't she already seal the space? Qi Huang. It must be that bastard Qi Huang. At this moment, she really wants to tear this trash spirit into pieces. Xiao Bao sits on the fat rabbit, and the rabbit's body expands to several times its original size, floating in the air. A beautiful fire phoenix flaps its wings, gently flying around Xiao Bao. Xiao Bao turns his head, and on his delicate and beautiful little face, there's a pair of red and swollen eyes, clearly crying. But seeing her at this moment, he shows an innocent and happy smile. Nyang Qin, don't be afraid, Xiao Bao will protect you. Tears welled up in her eyes, accompanied by a terrifying pain that numbed her heart. Xiao Bao, what are you doing? Quickly return to the space. Xiao Bao shakes his head, his little face full of determination. Xiao Bao has grown up. Xiao Bao vowed to always protect Nyang Qin, and never let Nyang Qin come to harm. Rumble. Another bolt of lightning fell, and the fat rabbit howled as it was sent flying dozens of meters away. Muyan's originally exhausted body suddenly pounced over and hugged Xiao Bao in her arms. She didn't know where she got the strength from. Muyan's body is covered in blood and dust. But when Xiao Bao is held in Muyan's arms, he only feels an indescribable peace of mind and happiness. He likes the smell of his mother, and he likes to be with her. He didn't want to be left alone in the space by his mother. He knew that his mother was in pain, but he couldn't do anything about it. Mother, don't blame Brother Chihuang. I was the one who asked him to let me out. Mother, Xiao Bao doesn't want to be alone. Xiao Bao wants to be with you. Xiao Bao has never been afraid of death. I'm only afraid that I won't have a mother anymore. She could no longer hold back her tears and they gushed out of her eyes. Muyan tightly hugged the little body in her arms, tightly, and was reluctant to let go. She said in a hoarse voice, "All right, regardless of life or death, Mother and Xiao Bao will not be separated." The ground beneath his feet suddenly shook. Chapter 838. The fat rabbit and Chochio raise their heads and look at the sky, their eyes revealing despair. Mu Yang's heart tightens. Looking up, she sees the thick crystal thunderclouds, like Mount Tai pressing down, quickly falling down. This is the final step of the God-slaying tribulation, leaving not even a blade of grass behind. Even if there are powerful cultivators who have withstood the previous thunder tribulation with their strength, they can't withstand the final descent of the divine thunder, the massacre of 10,000 tribulations. What's more, with Mu Yang's current cultivation, she shouldn't have attracted the God-slaying tribulation, and it's impossible for her to survive the God-slaying tribulation. Mu Yang holds Xiao Bao tightly, gently patting his back, humming a tune that is out of tune. She's never been good at these things, and she's never given her baby a stable home. However, her baby is always so obedient, so considerate, filling her gloomy world with color. Xiao Bao's face shows a happy smile, rubbing against Mu Yang's arms. There's not a trace of fear of death in his eyes. He only feels that as long as he can be with his mother, he's not afraid of death. Moreover, this time, he's finally like a man, able to protect his mother. The only regret is that Daddy is not here, and their family will probably never be able to reunite again. Will Daddy miss them in the future? The thunderclouds are getting closer, closer and closer. The fat rabbit and Chocho are running around, their voices panicked. But when they see the mother and son embracing, the two beasts suddenly stop all their movements, looking at the scene in front of them in shock. They see that Mu Yang and Xiao Bao's bodies are emitting a faint silver light at some point. The silver light is getting brighter and brighter, and the area it covers is getting bigger and bigger. The fat rabbit tries to walk into the silver light, but it only feels indescribably comfortable. On the ground, the originally barren land, little green grass has sprouted out at some point. The strings of the Tianmo Qin on the side seem to be blown by the wind, trembling on their own, making broken but moving notes. The fat rabbit howls and scurries into Xiao Bao's arms. Chocho quickly flaps its wings and stops on Mu Yang's shoulder. In the space, Qi Huang looks at this scene in a daze, then reveals an inexplicable smile. Interesting, I thought it was a dead end, I didn't expect there to be a turning point. Mother and child tribulation. Heh, I thought this kind of thing didn't exist anymore. Jun Muyan, in the end, how many more surprises do you want to give this son? I can't wait. The smile on Qi Huang's face seemed to be unable to be restrained. It was clearly an evil smile, but on his beautiful face, it looked like a mischievous youth who had successfully pulled a prank. Boom. An earth-shattering rumble shakes the entire Yanwu continent, as if it's about to be completely destroyed. But almost at the same time, a dazzling white light erupts from the Wuwang Mountains, and similarly shrouds the entire Yanwu continent. The earth-shattering momentum seemed to be nipped in the bud the moment the white light shone. The people of Yanwu continent, who are sleeping, wake up with a start. However, he could only see the night sky that was as bright as day, and the light that was gradually dissipating. The sky regained its starless and moonless darkness, and the earth fell into a deep slumber. It was as if nothing had happened, as if everything had happened yesterday. Only the vast Wuwang mountain range had been razed to the ground. Chapter 839. Not to mention Mu Yang and Xiao Bao, there wasn't even a single tree or beast. What's going on? Where's Miss? Where's the young master? What was that earth-shattering thunder just now? From the moment the thunder sounded, the people from the Hellflame Valley rushed over. However, the entire Wuwang mountain range seemed to be enveloped by a layer of enchantment, isolating it from the rest of the world and preventing anyone from entering. What happened here? Will Miss and Little Master be all right? No way. Yu Yang clenched her fists, her eyes staring at the huge pit that was smashed by the tribulation thunder. Gnashing her teeth, she said, "That's a tribulation thunder. That's right, that must be the tribulation thunder that Miss and Little Master attracted when they ascended. Miss and the others only went to the cultivation continent. That's right, it must be the thunder tribulation." Shun Jinglin shouted resolutely and decisively, as if to convince others, and also to convince himself. Yang Yang and Xiao Bao are so formidable. Yang Yang could have ascended a long time ago, it's just that she's been suppressing it. She absolutely won't die, absolutely nothing will happen to her. Yes, that must be the lightning tribulation. Back then, when Little Master had advanced to the Xiantian realm, he had attracted a terrifying lightning tribulation. Now that Little Miss had ascended, the lightning tribulation would naturally be extremely terrifying. Miss must have been afraid that we would be injured by the lightning tribulation, so she secretly came to the Wuwang mountain range. No matter how powerful the lightning tribulation is, young mistress and little master are even more omnipotent. They must have successfully transcended the tribulation by now and are galloping around the cultivation continent, voices kept ringing out. At first, they seemed to be comforting themselves. But slowly, everyone became more and more determined. That's right, who was Jun Muyin? She is Yenwu continent's most unique, most amazing genius for thousands of years. No, perhaps it should be said that he was an unprecedented monster. Their young master was even more unparalleled in the world. How could a mere thunder tribulation hurt their young miss and young master? We also need to work harder. Some people clenched their fists and looked at the grey sky with yearning and longing. Miss is waiting for us in that wider world. That's right. We have the spirit molding pill and the various cultivation pills that Miss left behind. We will definitely be able to advance successfully. When we reach the cultivation continent, we will also follow Miss and protect her. We, the Nether Flame Army, will live and die together and will never be separated. Through life and death, never apart. Following the tsunami of slogans, everyone's face showed a determined expression. Their eyes were blazing like fire, burning with ambition and conviction. Nothing could extinguish that kind of fire. Yang Haotian, Feng Haitang, Yu Yang and Bai Chen looked at each other and saw the determination in each other's eyes. Yes, Miss and Little Master would never die. And they absolutely did not want to stop moving forward and be left far behind by those two. They were still hoping that one day, the Nether Flame Army would be able to reunite on that vast land. Among the crowd, only Guan who looked around and frowned slightly. Chang Yu is not here? Did he ascend together with Miss? In the dark eastern sky, a wisp of orange-red light shone through the clouds. This desolate land that was riddled with holes was dyed with fresh colors. This used to be the Wuwang mountain range with the most exuberant life force. But now, not even a single remnant of life remained. Chapter 840. A clump of green grass grew slowly and laboriously, swaying gently in the breeze. One day, this patch of green grass would spread for tens of thousands of miles, and it would once again become the Wuwang mountain range that was filled with lush foliage and life. Just like the lives of the Yenwu continent. They were ordinary and insignificant. In the eyes of the high and mighty immortals, they were like ants, like insignificant flames. But this group of ants, these little flames, were so insignificant. As long as they were given a corner of the world, a turning point, a spark could start a prairie fire, and ants could overturn the world. Xiuxian continent, Tianyi Men. In a tightly shut secret room, Leng Qingwan opened her eyes and suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. On the 3 praying mats beside her, hibiscus, lily of the valley, and green bamboo had all been reduced to ashes. Leng Qingwan felt the empty spiritual power in her body, as well as the tearing pain in her body. Her eyes were filled with bone-piercing resentment. Suddenly, she thought of something and grabbed the monocular to take a look. But the surface of the 1,000-mile mirror was grey, and nothing could be seen. Only a few cracks appeared on the surface of the mirror. The monocular was destroyed, and the power of God-slaying tribulation was so powerful. 3 of his trusted subordinates were killed, half of his cultivation was lost, and the most valuable treasure of Tianyi Men was destroyed. This time, in order to kill Jun Muyin, it could be said that she paid a painful price. Unfortunately, that Tian Mo Qin, that Shun musician inheritance, she didn't manage to snatch a single one of them. Leng Qingwan's face contorted, but it was soon replaced by a maniacal laugh. So what if we suffer heavy losses? Jun Muyin, that slut was still killed by me. You want to live together with the monarch, you want to steal what belongs to me, Leng Qingwan. This is your end. Ha ha. Ha 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 ha, Polar Domain, Lingxiao Hall. The roar of thunder seemed to resound in his ears. Di Ming Ju abruptly sits up on the bed, his complexion deathly pale. Muyin. After a while, he stood up and walked out without hesitation. However, before he could reach the door, a few people rushed over and knelt in front of him. Lord, you can't leave this place. Di Ming Ju coldly looks at the people kneeling in front of him. Get lost. My lord, please listen to me. Elder Chang knelt on the ground and kowtowed heavily. The mirror of heaven and earth was corroded. You forcibly tore through time and space. Both your body and primordial spirit were severely injured, and your cultivation almost dropped by a level. If you don't recuperate in this soul cultivation house, your cultivation will never recover. That day, Emperor Mingju returned and dealt with Mo Rufeng with the force of a thunderbolt. He forced old Ji to admit his guilt. Just as everyone is rejoicing that everything has calmed down, Di Mingju suddenly collapses. Elder Chang went up to take a look, but he was scared out of his wits. Because Di Mingju's cultivation has almost directly dropped by a layer, and his primordial spirit is even on the verge of collapse. But even with such a serious injury, no one noticed him at all. He held on until he finished dealing with everything before collapsing. The soul nurturing house was actually a sacred ancestral artifact. It was just an ordinary stone house. There wasn't even any spiritual power in it, and it didn't look special. But this, soul recovery house, was a treasure that was hard to find in the world. No matter how badly his primordial spirit was injured, he could slowly recover in the soul nurturing house. Chapter 841. However, Soul Cultivation House had a limitation. It could only be opened once every 3 years. Once it was opened, the person who entered could not leave, or the Soul Recovery House would automatically close. The next time it opened would be 3 years later. When Elder Chang and the others see that Di Mingju is seriously injured, they quickly open the Soul Cultivation House and send him inside. Now, if Di Mingju leaves, the Soul Cultivation House will close, and his injuries will never be healed. Therefore, even if Elder Chang and the others disobey Di Mingju's orders, they will never allow him to leave. Moreover, if Di Mingju's cultivation really falls, and this news spreads out, it would be a fatal blow to the polar domain. So what? Di Mingju's voice is bone-chilling. I said I want to leave. Do you want to disobey Ben Jun's orders? This subordinate wouldn't dare. Elder Chang hurriedly said, My lord, are you leaving to look for Miss June? The thunder tribulation that shook the Yenwu continent, it wasn't just the people there who heard it. The people of the Shoshen continent were also shocked. Many people recognized it as the God-slaying tribulation. Di Mingju's hand suddenly clenches, the bottom of his eyes surging with billowing waves. He shouldn't have come back. In any case, he should have stayed by Mu Yang's side. The God-slaying tribulation was a God-slaying tribulation. Back then, he had barely survived it. How could Mu Yang get through this safely? Di Mingju's figure flickered and was about to leave. Even if he has to risk his cultivation, he must go to Mu Yan's side. Stop Jun Shong. Eldest brother Chang roars. His whole body pounces over, and he hugs Di Mingju's feet. Star Wolf, Han Yi, and Ying Mai all firmly hold Di Mingju in place, not letting him take a single step out of the soul cultivation house. My lord, listen to me. Your marriage lines have not disappeared and there are no changes. That proves that Miss Jun is definitely still alive. Ying Mai falls to his knees on the ground, his voice choked with sobs. He kowtows heavily towards Di Mingju. Jun Shong, this subordinate once formed a binding heart curse with the Little Master. This subordinate dares to use his life to guarantee that the Little Master is still alive. Mu Yang was still alive, and so was Xiao Bao. These two pieces of news make the almost insane killing intent in Di Mingju's eyes fade a little. Elder Chang heaved a sigh of relief and quickly said, although the God-slaying tribulation is difficult, it's not undefeatable. Although Miss Jun's cultivation was low, she had never been an ordinary person. Perhaps she really survived the God-slaying tribulation and left the Yenwu continent. Jun Shong, even if you go to the Yenwu continent now, I'm afraid that you won't be able to see Miss June. That's right, once she passes the thunder tribulation, no matter what kind of thunder tribulation it is, it's impossible for Mu Yan to stay in the Yenwu continent. Therefore, if she was still safe and alive, she should be somewhere on the cultivation continent. Elder Chang slowly releases Di Mingju's feet, and respectfully kneels on the ground. Jun Shong, this is actually a good thing. Miss Jun's ascension to the Xiozhen continent means that she's one step closer to you. The Xiozhen continent is not like the Yanwu continent. Even if you want to go there, there won't be that many obstacles, but the premise is that you have the ability to protect Miss Jun Jun Shong. Could it be that you've forgotten Miss Jun's identity? If she appears in the cultivation continent and even in the cultivation continent in the future, how many people will want her life and everything she has? Chapter 842. Elder Chang slowly raises his head, looking straight into Di Mingju's eyes. He enunciates each word. Do you want the tragedy of the Shun musicians to repeat itself on Miss Jun? Di Mingju's pupils suddenly contract. The madness in his eyes is slowly replaced by coldness and determination. Elder Chang's words are very respectful, very gentle, but each word is like a needle, piercing the bloody truth. He is the emperor of the polar domain. He can't disregard the tens of thousands of lives in the polar domain. Even more so, he can't lose the ability to protect Muyan. Otherwise, when Muyan's identity as a Shun musician is exposed, she will be consigned to eternal damnation. And he can only look on helplessly as those sanctimonious, greedy people tear Muyan apart. Jun Shong, this subordinate is willing to go to the Xiozhen continent and look for Miss Jun. As soon as Ying Mai's words leave her mouth, she is interrupted by Elder Chang. No, before Jun Shong recovers his cultivation and comes out of the soul cultivation house, none of you can go to Miss Jun, let alone approach her. Ying Mai jerks her head up, her eyes filled with anxiety and guilt. If Jun Shong hadn't been protecting her and Han Yi during the tearing of time and space, he wouldn't have suffered such a heavy injury. Elder Chang sighs. The Xiozhen continent is not like the Yanwu continent. Everything that happens there will be seen by many people here. Once you look for and approach Miss Jun, it will only make many people focus their attention on Miss Jun, which will bring about a fatal disaster to Miss Jun. Ying Mai sucks in a mouthful of cold air, dejectedly lowering her head. Han Yi gently holds her hand, softly saying, "Don't worry, Miss Jun is so powerful, she must know how to protect herself." Di Mingju's hand clenches into a fist, then loosens a little. It's as if Muyan's words are still echoing in his ears. If you know me well enough to want to spend a lifetime with me, then don't say such apologies. I'm not a dodder flower that attaches itself to you. I won't leave you in life and death, but it's impossible for you to stay by my side and protect me all the time. That way, I will lose my courage, lose myself, and become unlike Muyan. Di Mingju closes his eyes. When he opens them again, he has already restored his cold tranquility. At this time, the imposing manner around his body has once again returned to that of the polar domain's emperor. He slowly walked back to the bed and sat down. It was clearly a simple and crude bedroom with a luxurious stone bed, but because of his existence, it instantly became like a high and mighty Lingxiao palace. Star Wolf's eyes shone with a blazing light, filled with reverence. This was their emperor, a natural-born king. He was the person Star Wolf swore to be loyal to for the rest of his life. The only flaw was the woman who bewitched the god monarch. To actually let the sovereign monarch take risks again and again, to the extent that he completely disregarded the safety of the polar domain and himself. It would be great if that woman could die on the cultivation continent. The Star Wolf lowers his eyes, concealing the murderous intent in them. He respectfully and obediently kneels in front of Di Mingju. Send the order to the cultivation continent. The man's low and cold voice slowly sounded in this little stone house. 3 days later, the polar domain, Jasper Banquet, will be held. Elder Chang's eyes widened, and it took him a while to recover from the shock. The Jasper Banquet was a grand event that was held once every 10 years in the polar domain. Its purpose was to select concubines for the polar domain's emperor. But ever since Di Mingju became the polar domain's sovereign, the Jasper Banquet has never been held again. Chapter 843. But today, Jun Shong actually wants to hold the Jasper Banquet. Di Mingju slightly narrows his eyes, and an invisible pressure spreads out in the stone house. What? Didn't you hear Ben Jun's order clearly? No, no. This subordinate will go and prepare. Everyone retreats in confusion, until only one person is left. Ming-ju opens his palm, and looks at the faintly flickering runes on it. His cold and stern eyes reveal a bone-piercing tenderness and longing. Yang, wait for me. The news that the polar domain is going to hold the Jasper banquet spreads throughout the entire Shoshin continent almost in a flash. Young master, Jun is going to hold the Jasper banquet. Will he announce that you are his divine empress at the Jasper banquet? In order to kill Muyan, Lung Qinghuan lost 3 of her trusted subordinates. Right now, she only has Zi Huan by her side. Zi Huan hands over the invitation to the Jasper banquet, her face full of excitement and agitation. Lung Qinghuan is ecstatic at first, but the scene of Ming-ju holding Muyan suddenly flashes before her eyes. Her face distorts, and she comforts herself. So what if that slut had seduced Jun? Now that that slut is dead, wouldn't the position of Polar Domain's mistress still belong to her? Jun holding the Jasper banquet at this moment is certainly because he's tired of that slut, and wants to select the real divine empress. And looking at the entire Shoshin continent, who else is more suitable than herself to become the mistress of Polar Domain? 3 days later, the Jasper banquet begins. Although it's only 3 days, many immortals who are far away simply can't make it. But on the day of the Jasper banquet, the Lingxiao Hall of the Polar Domain is still filled with guests from various forces. Among these guests, the majority of them were young girls with lustful expressions. Each and every one of them is looking at the high and lofty throne. Even if it's still empty, it doesn't prevent them from fantasizing about how heroic and otherworldly the master of that throne is, how a monarch descending upon the world would make people look up to him. Lung Qinghuan's gaze sweeps over the women present, and she proudly raises her head, letting out a disdainful snort. Zi Huan immediately says with disdain, "These women should take a piss and take a look at themselves. How dare they think of Jun? They aren't even fit to carry Miss Shoes." Because the Jasper banquet was held in a hurry, Ming-ju didn't even send people to inform many places. Therefore, those who came this time were all small sects and schools in the periphery, or forces attached to the Polar Domain. The status of the women sent over by these sects and forces naturally couldn't be compared to Lung Qinghuan, the young mistress of the Tianyi men. Sure enough, after those women found out Lung Qinghuan's identity, each and every one of them revealed an envious expression. Some whispers even reached Lung Qinghuan's ears. That is Tianyi men's young master, one of Shoshin continent's 3 great beauties, Qing-wn Fairy. For the Polar Domain to hold the exquisite pearl banquet this time in such a hurry, presumably they had already decided on the candidate for the Divine Empress. The rest is just a formality. The candidate for the Divine Empress must be Fairy Qinghuan. It's really enviable. I heard that the Polar Domain and the Tianyi men already had an engagement long ago. I'll be satisfied as long as I can become the Emperor's concubine. I don't dare to compete with Fairy Qinghuan for the position of Divine Empress. Chapter 844. The corners of Lung Qinghuan's mouth behind the veil hooked up into a haughty smile. Her pair of eyes stared fixedly at the throne. Imagining herself nestled in the Emperor's embrace and receiving the attention of tens of thousands of people, she felt indescribably carefree. The Emperor has arrived. The announcement silenced the entire hall. Then, a tall figure slowly walked over and casually sat on the throne. Everyone's gazes were focused on that person. Following that, the sound of people sucking in a breath of cold air could be heard in the hall. Everyone knew the name of the Polar Domain Empyrean, but only a few people had seen the real Empyrean. At this moment, many young girls' hearts were beating crazily, as if they were about to jump out of their mouths. How could there be such a handsome man in this world? Originally, he thought that the high and mighty Emperor only had monstrous power, but it turned out that even his appearance was unparalleled in the world. If she could gain his favor and be by his side, she would be willing to die. Originally, these girls were only a little jealous of Lung Qinghuan. But now, when he thought that Lung Qinghuan could become the wife of such a deity, he simply went crazy with jealousy. Lung Qingwan foolishly looks at Di Mingju sitting in the seat of honor, her eyes are filled with infatuation. After a long while, she finally stood up, took a few steps forward, and slowly bowed. "Greetings, Emperor." After bowing, she raised her head and revealed a smile that was just right, gentle and worried. "I haven't seen you for a few days. Emperor seems to have lost a lot of weight. Qingwan has refined some elixirs that can replenish blood and nourish qi. Emperor, please accept them." As she spoke, she took out a bottle of pills. When the people around her saw the elixir in her hand, their eyes were filled with excitement. Everyone knew that the medicinal pills refined by the Heaven's Physician sect were priceless and the best. What's more, it was personally refined by the Tianyi men's young master. Lung Qingwan maintains a proper smile on her face, waiting for the person next to Di Mingju to take the elixir from her hand. However, 1 breath passed, 2 breaths passed, 3 breaths passed. Lung Qingwan's hands were sore, but no one came over to receive the medicine. Old Ji, who had always flattered and fawned over her, was not even in the main hall. The smile on Lung Qingwan's face finally froze. She didn't know whether she should hand out the pill or take it back. Many people in the hall had already started to point at her and whisper among themselves. At this moment, Di Mingju slowly opens his mouth. This monarch heard that the Polar Domain and the Heaven Physician sect had once set up an engagement. Is that true? Elder Chang hurriedly said, replying to the emperor, this marriage agreement was set verbally between the previous emperor of the Polar Domain and sect master Leng of the Tianyi men. Di Mingju nods, his gaze sweeping over everyone present. Ben Jun has convened the Jasper banquet today precisely for this matter. The stiff smile on Lung Qingwan's face slowly returned to normal. His eyes lit up with a resplendent light. Sure enough, the reason why Jun Shong is holding the Jasper banquet is to fulfill the engagement and announce her as the Extreme Domain's Divine Empress. She discreetly took back the bottle of medicinal pills, then revealed a shy smile and said softly, "Marriage is the order of parents and the words of a matchmaker. Since this engagement was set by Master for Qingwan, Qingwan naturally is willing. Moreover, Qingwan's admiration for the emperor has never changed." Everyone's envious gazes fall on Lung Qingwan. Although the Tianyi men is powerful, and can be compared to the Polar Domain that rules over half of the Shoshan continent, it's still far from enough. Chapter 845. Di Mingju slightly narrows his eyes, the corner of his mouth hooks up into a sneer of ridicule. His gaze seems to sweep past Lung Qingwan with disgust, looking at everyone present. Everyone, witness, Ben Jun declares that the engagement between Ji Domain and Tianyi men is cancelled. Lung Qingwan has never been Ben Jun's fiancé. From now on, whoever dares to spread such rumors will be severely punished. Whoosh. Di Mingju's words are like a boulder thrown into a calm lake, setting off great waves in a split second. What's going on? Wasn't it said that Qingwan Fairy was going to be announced as the Divine Empress at the Jade Banquet? How could it be called off the engagement? I also heard that Di Jun is deeply in love with Qingwan Fairy, and doesn't let any woman get close to him, but only gets close to Qingwan Fairy. So all of this was just a rumor? Could it be that these rumors were spread by Qingwan Fairy? This is too shameless. The chattering sounds of discussion reach Lung Qingwan's ears, but she only feels like her brain is roaring, and she can't hear anything clearly. Her face is deathly pale, and her body is on the verge of collapse. Especially when those young girls who were just jealous of her are now pointing at her with ridiculing expressions. It makes her wish that she could find a hole to crawl into. Di Jun, why? How can you treat me like this? Lung Qingwan finally can't bear it, and shouts loudly. She rushes forward, wanting to grab Di Mingju's hand, but he ruthlessly shakes it off in disgust. Lung Qingwan awkwardly falls to the ground, and the gauze covering her face is lifted, revealing her pale and distorted face. The surrounding young girls let out waves of disdainful ridicule. Oh, I originally heard that Qingwan Fairy is one of the 3 great beauties of Shoshan continent, and I thought she was very good looking, but it turns out that she's nothing more than this. That's right, she's not as beautiful as Sister Qinglian, No wonder Di Jun doesn't like her. With this kind of appearance, she still has the nerve to call herself one of the three great beauties. If she wasn't Di Jun's fiancée, do you think she would have a place in the three great beauties? Everyone's ridiculing laughter, pointing and humiliating fingers, makes Lung Qingwan feel like the world is spinning. She had been at the top all her life and was sought after and envied by others. When had she ever suffered such public humiliation? This kind of humiliation was even more unbearable than losing half of her cultivation. It was even more unbearable than death. Di Mingju. Lung Qingwan screams hysterically, "How can you do this to me? The engagement was set by your father and my master. You can't cancel it. You must marry me." Di Mingju stands up and condescendingly looks at her. What if Ben Jun doesn't marry? Why? What's wrong with me? I'm the young lord of Tianyi Men. I know how to refine medicine, and my talent is top-notch. How am I not worthy of you? Why are you doing this to me? Di Mingju slightly narrows his eyes, his exceptionally handsome face slowly hooking up into an evil and callous smile. Ben Jun feels disgusted just by looking at you. Marrying you is worse than marrying a sow. Are you satisfied with this reason? Lung Qingwan's eyes suddenly widened, her chest heaved up and down violently, and her eyes turned white. The wound that she had already suppressed erupted again. She suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground, almost at her last gasp. Chapter 846. Finished speaking, Di Mingju doesn't stay any longer, and turns to leave. Elder Chang watches as Di Mingju's figure disappears. His line of sight falls on the shocked and excited crowd, as well as Lung Qingwan, who is lying on the ground, looking as if she could faint and die at any moment. He curls his lips and sneers. Were the people of Tianyi Men really a bunch of idiots? Because of the kindness of those years, Di Jun had always been courteous to the people of Tianyi Men. Even if Lung Qingwan was spreading rumors outside, she had never thought of punishing him to clear his name. However, he didn't expect that Lung Qingwan would unexpectedly reach for a yard after being given an inch. She was so audacious that she dared to interfere in the internal affairs of the polar domain. Did they really think that the emperor was a gentle and harmless person that they could manipulate and slaughter at will? Heh! Little did they know that sometimes, the emperor was the most ruthless and narrow-minded person. Especially when someone touched his reverse scale, touched the person he cared about the most. After today, the news that Di Mingju despises Lung Qingwan for being disgusting and inferior to a sow will spread throughout the entire Shoshan continent. From then on, when people talked about Lung Qingwan, she was no longer a cold and aloof fairy that people envied. Instead, she was a scheming and shameless woman whom the god monarch despised. For Lung Qingwan, who cared about face and vanity the most, this was 100 times more painful than killing her. Sure enough, no matter who you offend, you can't offend an emperor. Elder Chang shook his head with a smile and announced loudly, "The exquisite dragon banquet has come to an end. Everyone, please return. One day, the polar domain would hold the real Jasper banquet. Wait until the moment when their true mistress, their holy queen, descends." The people in the Lingxiao Hall gradually dispersed. Although the immortal Jade banquet had started and ended abruptly, although the dreams of these young girls and their sects to soar into the sky had not come true. However, not many people felt regretful. Instead, they were all excited. She couldn't wait to immediately spread the news that Lung Qingwan and Tianyi Men had been abandoned by Polar Domain's monarch in public. In the soul-nurturing house, Di Mingju's body, lying on the stone bed, suddenly opens his eyes. His complexion was a bit pale. This time, forcefully separating his primordial spirit to leave the soul-nurturing house made his injuries even worse. The time needed to recuperate would also be longer. But he did not regret it. If it weren't for Lung Qingwan and Elder Ji, Mo Rufeng wouldn't have been forced to separate from Mu Yang. Now he was unable to leave the soul cultivation house and was unable to obliterate the Tianyi Men. At the very least, he would make Lung Qingwan pay a painful price. Di Mingju spreads out his hand, and gently kisses the lines on his palm. In a split second, he changes from being full of hostility to being as gentle as water. Yang Yang, Xiaobao, wait for me. He repeated it again and again, as if it were the most devout vow. Yang Yang, wait for me. Yang Yang, wait for me. Yang Yang, I will definitely return to your side. Yang Yang. Yang Yang, Mu Yang suddenly opened his eyes, but he only felt pain all over his body, as if it was about to fall apart. She sucked in a breath of cold air and let out a low moan. But then, she felt that something was wrong. As he breathed, cool spiritual energy flowed into his meridians. It felt like she was cultivating next to the spirit vein in the space, but the spirit chi here was much thicker than in the space, just not as pure as in the space. Where was she? What happened? That's right, thunder tribulation. God-slaying thunder tribulation. Mu Yang abruptly sat up from the ground and looked all around. Xiaobao. However, what she saw was a messy house, not the thunderous Wuwang Mountains. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.